We wanted to keep you waiting a little bit, keep you on your toes. We thought a 5-14 start would be unpredictable, right? We want to keep that spontaneous relationship that we've all became so accustomed to alive and well. And one thing that might not be spontaneous is the guest I have with me today, Jay from Unfair Sports, a all too familiar face for those that have tuned into the channel. If you don't know who Jay is, quite frankly, you're probably new to the channel, and welcome if you're new to the channel. But Jay, before we get into all of this, because there is a lot to talk about, let the people know where they can find all your great content.
Yeah, just search me on YouTube, Unfair Sports. We take a pensive approach to the sports conversation. And of course, I love being here with you, Ty, one of my favorite people to chop it up with. And yeah, man, there's a lot going on right now in the college football world, especially in recruiting. And I think you mentioned this before, this is like the peak month of really getting the OVs in. And then you start to see the floodgates open for the commitments. And it seems like majority of your best players are getting them done here in June so that they can just kind of relax and coast into the school year.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation that it's a question I don't think we've ever outright answered. But if we have time tonight, I think it's something we should dive into at the end. Are these 5-star guys, these blue chip 4-star guys, are they more likely to commit earlier in the process or later? And I think that that's an interesting conversation where we could provide multiple examples for both. But man, speaking of just insane weekends, we're going to talk about ChampU. We're going to let people come in, trickle in as this is just getting started. I don't think there's a better place for us to start than the weekend that the Florida Gators just had. I talked
Oh
about
my
this
God.
earlier. Florida gave us all something very unique this weekend. And I want everybody to remember this because Florida not only gave us something incredible to watch, but they gave us a story. They gave us an answer to when people ask you, why are you so passionate about college football recruiting? Things can change at the drop of a hat with NIL, with the transfer portal. What is it about college football recruiting that draws you in? Your answer? That weekend in the middle of June where the Florida Gators went on an insane run. To begin the story, we have to start with the 2025 quarterback, Austin Simmons, committed to the Florida Gators, who a report comes out that he's supposed to reclassify from 2025 to 2023 and enroll with the Gators.
Well,
Now,
stop. When you say that one more time for the people in the back, 'cause I don't know if everybody heard you when you said that.
he was going to reclassify from the 2025 class to the 2023 class and enroll with Florida. We've seen reclassifications before. Trayvon Grimes is a great example. Whenever COVID
Mm-hmm.
happened, he wasn't going to be able to play high school football his senior year. There was going to be no high school football. He was a great student, and he said, why not? I can go ahead and reclassify. Boom, boom. Refresh to say, hey, it happens to the best of a shadow. Just glad you're here. So we've seen these reclassifications, but I can't think off the top of my head a reclassification where we're talking 2 years. Not 1 year. We're talking a kid that is making a massive jump. But that's only the beginning of the story because it didn't take long for the family to come out and start refuting that information that he would be reclassifying from 2025 to 2023 and enrolling with Florida. Only for within a 48-hour window, I get an alert. Hayes Fawcett tweets. And I have his tweets to where whenever he tweets, I get a notification. Right. I'm sure most people who follow recruiting do the same thing. And as I'm reading the graphic and I'm reading the tweet, it says Austin Simmons has reclassified from the 2025 class to the 2023 class and flipped his commitment from the Florida Gators to Ole Miss. Like I said, earlier that week, we'd heard that he was reclassifying, then he wasn't reclassifying. Now we get the best of both worlds. Not only is he reclassifying, that part of the report was correct. The only part of the report that was incorrect is where he would be enrolling. It wasn't Florida, it was Ole Miss, which begs the question, Jay, we're going to get into. How many damn quarterbacks do you need? I mean, goodness gracious me, oh my. We're talking Jackson Dart last year. We're talking Spencer Sanders. We're talking Will Howard. And I get it. Lane Kiffin, offensive brilliance oozes from him. But geez Louise, I'm interested. And we'll open up that conversation. But then we get into the back end, right? Because that's only half the story. Florida then goes on an insane run. where they get Aaron Childs from Maryland, someone who Michigan looked like they were in great position for. They get Amir Jackson, the athlete from Georgia, top 150 player in the nation, looks to play tight end, standout basketball player, and he has got a lot of ability. Great addition right there. Jay, we talk about all the time how I view tight ends. I love this win. They get Amaris Williams, the defensive line from North Carolina, top 200 prospect in the nation. They get Nasir Johnson, top 300 prospect in the nation along the defensive line. And then going into today, they get 2 more commitments. One on the defensive line, one on the offensive line. The defensive lineman, they get 6'5", 350 pounds. Yeah, that's a big boy. To quote, and I'm going to finish right here, Jay, and I'm going to pass it to you. I didn't mean to be long-winded with this. It's just this is an unbelievable situation. To quote Michael Corleone from one of the greatest movies ever made, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. That's college football recruiting. When people ask you, why do you love college football recruiting? You will forever remember that one weekend in the middle of June in 2023 when Billy Napier turned Twitter on its head within a 24-hour span. Jay, what was your thoughts looking at all of this?
First off, great job of laying the land and the landscape for everybody so we can understand exactly what's going on. And secondly, man, this has been an insane weekend for Florida. Now, and I say this because we've been hearing about how things have been questionable under Billy Napier's run as of late at Florida. And so there's been questions even about him lasting there. Josh Pate just recently put out a video talking about just everybody's asking questions. What the heck is going on with Florida? And then you have this quarterback situation where Sims comes up, decommits, commits to Ole Miss, and then reclassifies 2 years, not 1, but 2. He's a freshman. I mean, of course, he had like a 5.34 GPA, and they said that he was able to finish all his high school classes basically as a freshman, which I get it. You know, he could have clipped out of a lot of them, but no, I wouldn't have done it either, honestly. But it's just crazy that we've seen so much loss come out of Florida, but then you have this weekend where they have 6 people commit that quickly, including some of the top players on the defensive side of the ball. Just say, yeah, you know what? We're going to go ahead and go to Florida, like with like Aaron Childs pulling up. The only thing that concerns me about the commitment snowball that we're seeing out of Florida is how many players they always have decommit also. It's not a bad thing to get players in. It sucks when you bring them in and they go right back out the door. And that's kind of why I don't really get too antsy about like what's going on with like teams like Oklahoma, and the way Clemson does it is they know that they're trying to prevent the revolving door effect, because Florida's going to continue to recruit on top of you. If they get somebody better than you, they're going to bring them in and they may try to talk you into just decommitting. I'm hoping that that's not the case with the way that they play the game, but it seems like it because they have so much turnover in that capacity that it feels like they're ushering guys in and out nonstop. And so as long as they can make this stable and we can stop with the questions around Billy Napier and the crap that they're doing there, I think this is a really good thing for them. But I have to wait and see how many of these 6 players are actually going to sign on the line, which is dotted come December.
All
or
fair.
hell, if they're going to be there in August.
All fair. All fair. 100% all fair. And personally, that only piques my interest more. Right? Like that only gives more credence into why I say this is a unique thing that Billy Napier has given college football fans. He's given you an answer. For those of you that know me, you'll know there's nothing in the world I love more than an answer. A good story is great, but a story that provides an answer, gives clarification to a why. Oh, I can't wait to tell that story. And that's exactly what we were given. Now, if you're a Florida fan, you were given something entirely different. Not only were you given a story, you were given an entire experience.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. And looking at, so let's jump into this high schooler changing up and reclassifying, and he's going to college 2 years early. We was talking about this in the green room, and it was a very fascinating thing to me when I saw it.
You had a really interesting take on this.
I dropped a short on it just to kind of talk about how this is going down. But the thing that fascinated me the most about this is that what is it about leaving high school that appeals to him to just immediately go to college? Now, granted, we know about kids that go to college. graduate high school early, graduate high school at 14, 15, 16. We've heard about that. This is nothing new in the world. But what really intrigued me about all of this was that at his size, he's 6'2", 180. So technically, he's about collegiate size, freshman size going into college. So physically, he should be okay as far as training goes. And so, but when we talked about it, it makes sense to me. It looks like with all the quarterbacks they have on the team right now, on the roster, that he goes in there, focuses for 2 years on getting school and training done for being a quarterback, and basically gray shirt, red shirt type setup, and then has 4 years of eligibility, most of his college done, and focusing only on just main courses, but really can tune in on football and start playing in like 2 years. Is Lane Kiffin looking that far down the road? Is he that much of a genius that that not a bad idea, especially because there's players of physical tools to actually be in college today? That's what jumped out to me. I'm curious as to why.
Yeah, no, look, there's going to be so many conversations around this, right? Like the question I asked, how many quarterbacks do you have on that roster? And I say this partially in jest, just because that's been something we've talked about several times here, right?
Right.
But that is an interesting thing to think about, is the fact that they now have this guy who can come in, and this is someone who's very talented, has really interesting size for his youth, right? But at the same time, it's just hard to ignore the fact how young you are coming into a college locker room, a college environment. I wish all the best. This is certainly a story we will be keeping up with. I think we're going to have several more conversations about this. And Travis has an interesting take here. And Travis, this is interesting because whenever the Austin Simmons news came out, the first thing I said is, this is right after the Rashada news. And no matter if there is blame to be placed at the feet of the collective for Florida or not, whether or not there is, the court of public opinion has already been made up. And if the court of public opinion states one thing, it's very hard to change public perception, incredibly hard to change public perception. Heck, that's why in some cases they sequester juries, because they don't want any public perception navigating where you may choose, navigating where your opinion may lie. So Travis states, it seems possible that Florida pressured a lot of kids to commit to distract from the Simmons bomb. It certainly was a bomb. Napier simply can't hang on to quarterbacks, it seems. Flip Jeremiah and you have my attention. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you, man. They flip Jeremiah. That's going to be incredible. You flip him from Ohio State, Brian Hartline. That's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, that's a dub. If you can do that, wow. But I honestly think if anybody flips Jeremiah, it's going to be Florida State. I think they have the best chance. I think that Mike Norvell is doing some magic there.
Norvell is doing some interesting things at Florida State. Very interesting. That's a team that's must watch this year. Absolutely must watch TV. I think the other thing that's interesting here, Travis, is that we, in our little group chat, had a very similar message that I had sent. And I was like, once again, the court of public perception on the Jaden Rashada situation, it is what it is. And now you look at DJ Lagway. And I stated, and I'm certainly not expecting that to happen, right? DJ Lagway is someone who's doing great work for the Florida Gators class. I mean, every time I hear about it, they say he is recruiting others, really active, trying to get players to join that class. But God forbid they lose DJ Lagway. That would be something awful for Florida fans. No, I don't wish that on anybody, but that's an interesting thing to think about. It also feels like kids may look to reclassify before inevitable NIL regulations material. Hey, that is another really good point, because there are changes to the NIL sphere on the horizon. What those changes look like, I have no idea, because I just can't trust anybody at any level to do anything correct in terms of decision-making capability, whether we're talking about Congress, whether we're talking about least of all, the NCAA.
Right.
See, that's actually a great point, Travis. I hadn't really thought of it like that, but that is a fantastic point.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. That's a good one, especially with the way that it, like you mentioned, it's going to come down the line. They've got to make some adjustments to the way NIL is working, mainly because they're freaking out about it. Like it's a lot of people hate the fact that it's the Wild Wild West. I love the fact that it's the Wild Wild West, and at some point it's going to even itself out. It's gonna balance. the market will reset itself like it always does. At some point, we'll recognize, okay, this is the value, this is the true ROI, and a lot of these NIL collectives and stuff are going to find the actual balance on players because they're going to get burned on one or two of them. A couple of athletes are not going to pan out the way they want. And they're going to be like, all right, we're going to pull back the reins on some of these. So if he's reclassifying to take advantage of NIL, I wonder how that works with him being under 18.
I have so many questions. Yeah, like that is a great point. Something that Travis, you already know. I'd be very interested in talking with you specifically about this. That might be something we have to do. And before we go into ChampU barbecue talk, I did want to talk about a commitment that happened this weekend for a player that I do want to draw attention to, a player that I very much will enjoy watching their tape. I think they're a very talented player, and that's a guy that Texas got. Now, Texas got two very talented players this weekend, one on the defensive side of the ball, one on the offensive side of the ball. Santana Wilson out the state of Arizona on the defensive side of the ball, cornerback position. And the conversation there, Jay, to me, aside from his ability, Terry Joseph continues to just get some big time recruiting wins for the Texas Longhorns, or really anywhere he's ever been. I mean, we're talking about Malik Muhammad last year, Derek Williams last year. He played a part in the Arch Manning saga. And on top of that, if I go back to Notre Dame, he played a part in landing Kyle Hamilton. So Terry Joseph is a very interesting figure to me. But the guy I really wanted to talk about is the wide receiver they got, Freddie DeBose, top 200 prospect nationally. And he's coming off of an injury that pretty much will derailed his entire junior season. Circle the name. Really talented kid. If you look at 24/7 Sports, they say 6'1". If you look at his huddle, they say 6'2". But I mean, before he got injured, man, this kid had explosion written all over him. He could take a kick return to the house, a punt return. He could beat you deep. He could take a drag route to the house. A really fun playmaker and a wide receiver that kind of fits that Steve Sarkisian mold that we saw him establish at Alabama, taken to Texas, right? Like there's a certain body type, a certain core foundations that he really likes at the wide receiver position. And Freddie DeBose, great pickup. I did want to talk about him because he is coming off of injury. I think it's wild to say that, we're talking about a top 200 prospect that may be a little bit underrated. And I think where he's rated right now is fine, especially if we take into account the nuance of him coming off of injury. But I just don't think it's a name we've heard a whole lot about. So I did want to take a little bit of time to talk about Freddie DeBose. Really great addition for Steve Sarkisian. And if you're a Texas fan, I mean, we talk about Oklahoma having a slow start to recruiting. Texas is ranked outside the top 50, and I don't think that I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just they too have had a bit of a slower start, and just interesting to watch. But big weekend for the Texas Longhorns. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to watch either of those guys. See what you thought about that.
Yeah, no, I get you. I mean, they got 5 commits so far. And 2 back-to-back ones with Santana Wilson as well as Freddie DeBoy. And I'm watching some of his film, and yeah, no, he's an athlete. He honestly feels like a Texas wide receiver, Alabama type wide receiver, especially like we mentioned about Sarkisian, something that guys have had over the last like 4 or 5 years. He's strong. He looks a lot bigger than the 6'1", 6'2", 170 pounds he's got. He feels more like he's closer to 190 looking at him in comparison to the size of everybody else on the field. And this is through his sophomore year film. And so coming off of injury, I'm curious to see, the good thing is he's young. Being young when you come off injuries, usually it's always a hell of a lot better than it is coming back 38. From being 38 years old. Like I just hurt my back on my vacation, and now I can barely sit for like the last week. It's been awful. Went to the chiropractor this morning to try to figure out what the heck's wrong with me, but got to get these hamstrings stronger. But if he comes back healthy this season, he's going to shoot up the rankings just because of the skill set that I'm seeing out of him on his film, and then him being out of Texas. I was at Smithson Valley. This was at Schwartz, Texas is where he's at. And he's had a lot of offers from a lot of big schools. And so Texas has always done a good job over the last few years bringing in elite wide receivers, or really, really good ones. That Xavier Worthy's probably the one that everyone loves the most, and I think this is a solid pickup for them. I mean, he's going to be a nightmare in matchups down the line. I'm just hoping that my Sooners got enough corners to be prepared for him.
Y'all are stacking cornerbacks right now, whether you've gotten out the transfer portal. But I'm glad you came away with that same takeaway, because that's what I thought. I'm like, this is wild. I'm sitting here thinking a kid that's just inside the top 200, but one of the top 200 football players in all of high school football might be a little bit underrated. But once again,
Mhm.
important to understand the nuance of the injury. I could not agree more with you, man. Very fun player to watch. I'm really excited for what his senior season will hold. If he gets through it healthy, I mean, we're gonna have to circle the name. Love this. I did want to hit this comment right here before we move on to ChampU Barbecue, because I think it's time, man. Pooh says, once again, one of the greatest profile pictures.
Yeah, you just love that picture. It cracks me up.
Yes,
It cracks me
the
up.
I just I love it so much. One of my favorite. Anyways, Texas needed to get out of their delusional mindset. I expect good things from here. And you know what's interesting, Pooh? One of the first videos I made whenever I got started into this was, I got a lot of pushback for it, but it was when Tom Herman was just about to be fired, and I said Texas fans need to be irate with what's happening at Texas right now. And I went back and I was like, it's been 15 plus years since you had a first round drafted in the offensive room. It's, this complete lack of development. Something has got to change. And what I will say about this staff is you have a lot of guys that are much more accustomed to being around programs that have won. Right. We look at Kyle Flood, his time at Alabama. We look at Jeff Banks, his time at Alabama. Steve Sarkisian coming from Alabama. We look at Bo Davis, his time in the NFL, his time at Alabama. So this is an interesting Texas staff. Whether they'll completely turn the ship around or not remains to be seen.
Correct.
This is going to be a big year for us to see that. If it goes bad this year, hey, we'll start asking the necessary questions. You don't worry about that. But I am excited to see. Very excited.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Sarkisian going to Texas, and even though I joke about 7 wins Sark as the name that a lot of the moniker that people give him because of his track record of being a head coach over the years, he's done this. There's no excuse for not 10 wins this season for Texas, and I expect the OU Texas game to be a dogfight. I don't expect it to be a
It
blowout on
always
any
is.
side. We should have at least 2 quarterbacks prepared to play this year, so we won't be walking into the scenario that we did in the past. So I do expect it to be a really good and fun game. I'm going to be down there for that one. But there's really no excuse for Texas to not be able to move forward properly. The question is going to be, is the boosters going to be okay with giving Sark time if there is a season that's not up to snuff, I guess you could say. If Sark starts losing coordinators and taking other jobs, will they actually start losing their mind again and then try to fire him quickly? Like, I got the Charlie Strong firing. He kept going through coordinators, and you're not going to be stable enough to win games if you got a new coordinator every other season, not because of them getting hired to new jobs, just because they just were underperforming. That's going to be the question that we're going to have with Sark, is can he be decisive enough or bring in someone that's decisive enough to help them with second half adjustments? Every Texas fan I've talked to all points out the same thing about last season. One of the big issues is the second half adjustments and changes. Sark's never been good at that. That's just not who he is.
Yeah.
If he's got somebody there that can do that for him or help him go that direction, bringing in established head coaches. Like having Gary Patterson last year was great. Wonder where Gary's going to end up now, but that's key in long-term success, is being decisive and making it happen and making those right changes. So as long as he does that, should be fine. I'm thinking they should be fine.
The one thing you said, man, I love this, because if you're asking me what is a legitimate gripe with Sark, if you're not a fan of the Texas Longhorns, catching up.
Gotcha. Right there in the chest.
Yeah, this is what happens when you talk all day. But if you're asking me what's a legitimate gripe with the Texas Longhorns, if you're an Oklahoma fan and you want to engage in your Twitter arguments, your Twitter debates, what do we point to? And I think one of the things that is a very real conversation to have is the lack of second half adjustments. Now, that's going to be why I say this year is a big year in every way possible, but that would be a conversation for you to look into and go from there. And Tijuana, you're certainly not wrong. You'd love to see the 10-win seasons. Certainly not wrong. But I think if we get the second half adjustments right, that will get us, that will more clearly take us to the 10-win seasons, at least in my theory, right? Whether I'm right or not, I have no idea. That's just the way I view it.
I think it's a fair assessment.
I'm probably wrong. If you ask my fiance, she's going to tell you I'm definitely wrong. Pooh says Sark is a script writer who jumps on defenses early when he can't run all hell. That's a great point, Pooh. I've said this. Sark's opening scripts are usually beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. Look at how he came out and hit Bama.
Yeah. He's like he's like an Eric Spoelstra in basketball. I'm gonna throw an NBA analogy at you, where they know how to immediately attack the defense. They run specific plays that they know will exploit everything early. But the problem is they go into the second half doing the exact same thing sometimes. And so the team is usually ready. They're like, "Oh, we'll do the exact same thing." And as Pooh mentioned, if we can't run, which is crazy to me because last season, most of the running was done by Bijan Robinson figuring it out after he getting hit in the backfield.
Yeah. Their offensive line, this is one of the most interesting things.
Crazy.
Their offensive line, for being a young offensive line, graded better in pass protection. And this was at a certain, I think this is still the case. They graded better in pass protection than they did in run protection. Now, that was towards the very end of the season. I checked that. I think it was still the case. But yeah, no, that's a great point. And Keaton says, I also feel like UT is going to miss Bijan. I think any team that had Bijan would miss Bijan, right? Like, let's be honest here. Bijan was sensational. Unbelievable. Yeah, they have talented running backs. Go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no, I was going to say, I 100% agree because that's the type. Oklahoma missed Adrian Peterson when he was gone. And that's just what happens when you have generational type talents like that.
Yeah.
When they're special, you're going to miss them.
And they've recruited running backs well. They got 2 or 3 running backs on that roster that I really, really like. Actually, I think they have more. There was another guy in that spring game who really looked good. So they have some guys I think have a lot of upside, but Bijan was special. There's no questioning how Bijan was special. Now, I know we said we were going to get into ChampU. I do have one little announcement. Alabama recruiting nugget. 2 things here. Won't take me but 5 minutes. First and foremost, 5-star edge Colin Simmons in town this weekend for the Crimson Tide. The question is, can Alabama make up time? Oklahoma fans, you would love nothing more than for Alabama to disrupt this battle because you're looking at leaders that include Texas and LSU. Alabama could come in here and disrupt that. Now, the thing is with this that I'm watching, Jay, Alabama's landed the number 1 edge for several years in a row, and we've talked about on air how many 5 stars are currently in that room. If I do currently sitting in that room, we're talking Dallas Turner, we're talking Chris Braswell, we're talking Jeremiah Alexander, Keon Keeley, Yonze Pierre, and Quay Rousseau, depending if they want to put Quay Rousseau at outside or inside. He's got the ability to do both. That's 6 5-star edges. That's 6 5-star outside linebackers, not to mention Quandarius Robinson, who ranked as the number 34 prospect in the nation in his respective recruiting class. Keanu Cott, who came in as number 44 in the nation. If they miss this year on the edge outside linebacker position, I'm going to be not surprised because they've stacked so much talent there. It's tough to win them all, right? It just is. The second area, the one that I really wanted to get to, Ellis Robinson has announced he has locked in an official visit to Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, that's something we have to watch. Currently committed to the Georgia Bulldogs, the number 1 defensive back in the nation. But everybody remember this. Desmond Ricks was the number 1 cornerback in the class of 2024 before he reclassified to the class of 2023 and then came in as a top 20 prospect in the nation. If Alabama could double down and get Ellis Robinson as well, oh, that'd be big. We have to acknowledge who they're going up against, the Georgia Bulldogs. You can't argue with Georgia's development, so I won't even try. You can't argue with their on-field results, so I won't even try. You know, you are going up against a machine. It is a machine going up against a machine. That's what makes this so fun. We also have to acknowledge who Nick Saban is, the defensive back prowess he's had, and Travaris Robinson, a cornerback coach I love. But yeah, that's the big news for Alabama. Thoughts on that, Jay?
I'm just kind of tired of y'all doing what y'all doing, man. It's can we share? Like, why y'all got to hog off everybody? Why are you, Georgia, got to do that? Let's spread the wealth. But no, on a serious note, development is key for a lot of these players. And I can see where the struggle would be bringing in additional linemen, because defensive linemen, because of how many guys are stacked on. A lot of these kids understand all I need is 1 year of Alabama tape, and I'm probably can go pro with it. And that's just the key thing on development. That shows that, look, you can be, if you want to be a college football legend, you need to go play somewhere else. But if you want to go to the pros, you can come here, you get a year tape, and boom, we can send you on to the league. And just preaching that and showing those results, that's enough for you all to be successful long term in getting these players.
Yeah, that's one thing I will say. We saw not too long ago, Quinnen Williams. We knew he had upside, but 1 year really starting, and boom, first round NFL draft pick. So it happens. It absolutely happens. And
Georgia got the same players too. So yeah.
Goodness gracious. I just got a picture, and nothing. I thought it would be news because of where I got it from, but it was a picture of one of the guys on a visit standing next to Jahad Campbell. And oh my God, Jahad Campbell is. And speaking of guys, a 5-star that could be either way, Jahad Campbell could play inside or outside. So if I counted that, it'd be 7 5-stars at the outside line, which is just dumb. Dallas Turner is going to erupt this year. Can't wait. But ChampUBBQ. Look, we know what this is. This is the premier recruiting event for the Oklahoma Sooners. And Jay, I'm going to let you take the floor. Open up, take as much time as you need. Talk to us about your thoughts, and I'll just fill in the rest.
All right. So Oklahoma brought in, if you want to jump on KP first with the $5 donation, do that. Go ahead. We'll do that first. Then we'll dive deep into ChampUBBQ because there's a lot.
Thank you very much, Jay. KP, thank you very much for the $5. He says, let's hear your thoughts on Southern Cal recruiting. Absolutely will, man. Interesting you say that. Stay tuned, because after ChampUBBQ, the segment we're ending tonight on, I will be covering USC. That's in the cards, so stay tuned about that. Jay, go ahead.
Okay, so, of course, we all know the Sooners had a long laundry list of athletes come into town for ChampUBBQ weekend. It's one of the bigger recruiting weekends that the Sooners always put together. And I'm going to be honest, based upon a lot of the reports, the insider notes, and the stories and stuff, we probably knocked it out the ballpark with this weekend's setup. I mean, you had big defensive linemen like Nigel Smith, Dominic McKinley, David Stone, Zena Umazulu hanging out. You had if you name top defensive linemen, they were probably in town hanging out. And because of that, I'm a lot more confident in what this staff is doing than I was a year ago. They're pursuing and pushing for all these top players. Like, let's talk about one, Dominic McKinley. I've got a video I'll put together on him, just going through his film, and I'll drop it probably later on today or tomorrow. And watching him play, watching his size, I mean, he's like 6'6", 6'7", about 280, 290, huge defensive lineman, the number one player in the state of Louisiana. The fact that LSU even let him get out of the state to do visits at Oklahoma, and he's going to Texas this coming weekend, that tells me that there's an open mind to go in other places. And so the Sooners have been really heavy into SEC country with a lot of these kids they're bringing in. My God. So that's just to start on the defensive line side. Like, David Stone, I'm going to say I think he's going to become a Sooner. I think that at some point he's going to go ahead and flip the switch and say, I'm done with all my visits. He's in East Lansing, I think today or tomorrow. He'll be up there at Michigan State doing his last OV that he stated is his last OV. And then I'm expecting him to go ahead and lock it down and say, I'm done with my visits. And I anticipate that Oklahoma's going to win his services. A combination of him and his two buddies from Oklahoma, Caden Durham, who's out of Duncanville, Texas, but the running back, but is from the Moore, Oklahoma area, which is Oklahoma City Metroplex. And then adding in Michael Patterson McDonald, which is another close buddy of his. All three of them grew up together, and all three of them basically said they at some point they were interested in playing ball together at the next level. And so the perfect opportunity is college, because that's the one place you can actually choose where you play.
Control it, yeah.
You can control that. In NFL, you can't. Here, unless you're a free agent, or get drafted luckily enough, but more so in college, you can choose that. And I can see all three of them deciding that that's what they want to do. They showed a lot of love on the trip. as you go down the line of these players that pulled up for ChampU, there was so much love shown on social media. And, recruits show a lot of it, but there was like multiple pictures and multiple posts. I'm used to seeing players put up like their standard picture of them being there and, them showing off jewelry or in front of cars and stuff. But they was putting up videos of them hanging out and just laughing and joking. It was just like a little weird. I'm not used to y'all just showing behind the scenes like this. So it felt like there was a comfort that this staff is showing. And of course, we talked about the policy that Coach BV and staff has, mainly BV, that he doesn't want you to commit until you're ready to truly commit and you're done.
If I may,
yes.
Freelance asked the question, why didn't OU sign anyone over the weekend? And what a better time for me to continue exactly what you were going to say, because it answers this question, Freelance.
Yeah, it's more so Brent Venables and staff has a policy that once you commit, no more official visits, no more visits anywhere else. You are committed to us. And so we will commit to you, meaning we'll take something off our board when you commit to us. So you say, I'm as a top defensive lineman, Oklahoma plans on bringing in 4 of them. And if 2 of them say they're committed, they're going to take 2 names off the board that they're going to pursue. And I believe that they communicate that even with the players. And so because of that policy being in place, they're telling everyone, if you're ready to commit, we will take you, but got to cancel your visits. If not, enjoy the process. We want you to enjoy. You only get it one time unless you go into the transfer portal, in which you really don't want to. Enjoy this out of high school. Enjoy going through the process. Then come commit. This year, we have more recruits committed here in June now than we did last year. And last year, the team finished up in the top 5 recruiting class. So July is usually the busiest commit month for Oklahoma because that's around that point. Kids are getting ready for high school. They're getting ready to play high school ball. They're going through training regimens. They're not doing as much traveling. And then at that point, boom, you got high school football going down and school starting. And so that is really why you probably didn't see any commitments yet. Now, there's a chance you may see a commitment in the next 24 to 48 hours. There's a few players that have kind of indicated they're going to go ahead and commit. We're just waiting for them to do that. And if they decide that they're not going to take official visits at the end of this week, which, like I said, this is the big week for it, then that, boom, you'll see some more. But that's usually why you don't see them. You'll see them in July, though, because last year I think we had maybe 10 commits last year in July.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge. It was a huge month. And I think that that's kind of what they go for. Give me some 4th of July fireworks. Let's push it to July. We can go for it from there.
Yeah, and look, I want to focus in on this defensive line, right? Because let's be honest, in any time.
Before you do that, jump on the comment that Nick V stated. That policy is stupid. Then OU shouldn't try to flip anyone. That's the point, Nick, is that if you're still doing visits, you're not committed. That's the point of the policy. It's all about actual commitment. If you are committed here, don't go nowhere else. Hence, perfect example, Clemson, Bryant Westco, and Sammy Brown. They had visits set up for other schools for this past weekend, and in July. They both canceled every visit going forward. Why? Because they already committed to Clemson, and that's Clemson's policy also. Once you commit, you're there. And they canceled all their visits. They're not going to go see nobody else. So they're actually committed. That's the reason why. Every other school doesn't do this. And kind of like Travis mentioned about like Florida, they get a whole bunch of people to commit, and then a whole bunch of people flip. And yes, it didn't work for Evans and Vasek. That's 2 people you can say. Can you name somebody else? That's kind of the point, is that if the players say that they are committed, then yeah, we're going to commit to you. But then the minute they show that they're no longer committed, we're going to go after other players. So the goal is to lock down. If you're going to be done visiting, be done visiting. That's all that they're doing with them. And that's why they wait on letting people do their commitments. They don't want them to go out and do additional visits if they say they're actually committed. Understanding the word. The word is committed. That's the key word.
Yeah, look, and Clemson does the same policy. Clemson really made this policy famous for as far as I can remember. It was really like a
I think so.
Brent Venables thing. But you have different variations of similar recruiting policies around the nation, right? You have certain things that schools will do. So it is interesting to see, right? Like there are different ways schools recruit. And we got to remember this, right? I always think back to when we're talking about the different manners in which schools recruit. I think back to like Nick Saban, whenever Jonathan Allen was talking about how Nick Saban won him over. And he said Nick Saban was the only coach that sat across from him and straight up said, like, and I quote, whether we sign you or not, like, we're going to win with you or we're going to win without you. So whether you want to come or not, like, that's on you, but like, we're going to do our own thing. And then he dipped out. And Jonathan Allen was sitting there and he was like, it was surreal because he was the only coach that told me. So that you have totally different recruiting styles, but there is this, Nick, and it is something I did want to talk about. It's the natural spinoff I wanted to hit whenever we're talking about this right here. Because not long ago, when I was looking at the Clemson recruiting class, I just kind of sat back and I started thinking to myself, what makes Clemson Clemson? In fact, what makes any school in terms of their recruiting prowess? And I started thinking about, if we read through the tea leaves, we can find themes with these prospects and kind of giving us insight into why they make the decisions they do. So when I started digging, the word I came up with for Clemson was culture. Whenever you hear anybody talk about Clemson, one of the first adjectives they use to describe it, if they're doing so in a positive manner, is culture. The culture, Dabo. And that's really interesting. That's very interesting to me. When I think about Oklahoma, what I think about is relationships. That's the adjective that I think of with this Brent Venables staff, is they're fostering relationships, and that's their calling card right now. Relationships with the players, relationships with the players' family. Whenever you sort of sit down and start listening, count how many times you hear the word. Seriously. No. I'm not being facetious here. Really start acknowledging it. You'll notice the theme, and you can say, but Ty, that's a word you hear with every staff. You're not wrong. I grant you this. Look at how it's being said. Really start looking, read between those lines, and you can find out a lot. It's the relationships. And that's what I find interesting. That's where we have to look at this policy and say, look, whether you agree with the policy or not, it got Oklahoma a top 5 recruiting class in the nation. And when you hear these prospects talk about their time there, their time with the coaches, it's all positive. So the relationships are being built and in a positive manner. So at the end of the day, look, it's working for them. It is something we need to look out for. Now, coming out of the weekend, right? Talk to us about names that you think the people should be looking out for.
So if we're looking at them based upon the tea leaves that we're reading right now, look at linebacker James Nesta out of North Carolina. He's probably one to look at as far as commitment watch. I've seen a whole bunch of crystal balls and future casts being thrown in for him for the last few days. Caden Durham, the running back out of Duncanville. Ja'Shawn Ross, the edge out of Kansas City area. Xavier Robinson, the running back from Midwest City, Carl Albert. Now, he's probably one of my favorites. He's rated as a 3-star right now, but I think he's truly underrated. 5A running back in the state of Oklahoma, ran for like 2,500 yards.
That cat's different.
Literally, they put the team on his back, and he carried them to a state championship at running back. Big, strong, 6'2", 220 pounds. And when I saw him, I was like, you're like 240 and you look like you're a little bit more muscular than I thought. And then I was talking about him in the video. He shot me a DM. I was like, man, if he hits sub 4 or 540, that's Derrick Henry arena. Like, he's probably going to grow to closer to 6'3". I think he's closer to 6'3" than he is 6'2". He may even be closer to 6'4" at this point. And he shot me a message that said, hey, I'm actually 4'5" is my 40 right now. I'm trying to shave it to about the 4'7", 4'6" range. And I'm like, that's absurd for your size to be able to run that fast and be able to hit people the way he does. Like, I have a video on my channel of him literally grabbing a corner and just throwing them to the side, like Derrick Henry did Josh Norman. It was chef's kiss. I need to put them next to each other because I think that'd be very fun to watch, but I digress. And then from there, I'd say on the defensive side, July is probably when we're going to look closer on more defensive linemen making their commitments. And like I said, I'm expecting Stone to go ahead and give his commitment at that point. I'm crossing my fingers, but I think Nigel Smith is getting close. There was a picture of all of them together. Nigel Smith, Zena, Umazulu. You had Stone, you had McKinley, and all of them in Patterson. You saw them, all those big defensive linemen together. I'm just like, And then they had like PJ Adebaware on the side, looking like he's been hitting the weights.
Yeah, he's
Be
huge.
afraid. He's huge now. Like he's huge now. Like he was 240 coming in from high school. I think he's closer to 260 now. He's probably put on 20 pounds of muscle in his last 5 months. He's huge.
Yeah, he's massive.
When I saw that picture, I was like, no, that's not fair. Like, wait,
Well,
Javon
also
Curse.
looking at that picture, man. So you see all these big time, I mean, top tier defense. Did you see the size difference between David Stone and just everybody else?
Yeah.
Like you that guy is, and because you turn on Nigel Smith's film, and that dude is a monster through and through, just sunning suns on the football field on Friday nights. And he was standing next to David Stone. And granted, Nigel Smith has an interesting build anyways. He's the type of guy that's they're just going to put him with the weights. They're not going to ask him to cut a pound. They're just going to say, here are the weights, get with Schmitty. And that guy, he's going to be fun to watch at the next level. If he ends up at Ohio State. I know that's not popular to hear Oklahoma. We got to cover all of our bases here. That way I don't get a quote tweet in a month or so. Oh, you say, got to cover all of our bases, but that guy, he's going to be fun to watch. But David Stone, man,
he's a big boy.
He's huge.
He's huge. And he's strong.
I didn't realize he was that big. I didn't realize he was that big.
Yeah. When you see him, you're just like, oh.
And it's not bad built. It's just like, because he's standing next to Nigel Smith. And I'm like, Nigel Smith is a monster. How are you that huge? I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would, Cordy. I want Stone to shock.
I mean, of course, a Texas fan wants him to commit to Texas.
I want Stone to shock the world and commit to
Alabama. Right?
I do.
I think we'd all would enjoy that for any of our teams. Like, I wouldn't even be mad if he went to Tennessee. I mean, it's just one of those
different.
He's different breed. I think he's one of those special defensive linemen. Like he makes me think of like the David Hicks when he was in last year's class. Hicks is a different breed of human being. You see him on the field. You're just like, no, this isn't fair. There should be rules against how good you can be. He hits that rule. Like there should be a rule against this. This is not fair.
Well, what's wild is he's not even, and per the 24/7 Sports Composite, he's a top 5 player. He's not even the number 1 defensive lineman. That's an accolade that goes to Williams and Nwaneri, someone who we are going to have to talk about a little bit, given your dual connection. And I mean, you turn on the film of Nwaneri, and I've said this before, the thing that just jumps off the screen, he might be one of the most scheme-proof defensive linemen I've seen in a while. And when I say scheme-proof, I don't mean in terms of like busting the offensive scheme. I mean in terms of like flexibility and defensive schemes. Because he's got the long frame. He can add weight. He can stay around where he's at. You can slot him. I mean, you can do a lot with him. He's cool. He's cool now.
When I was watching Williams Nwaneri's film yesterday, and I put up his film again on the video we're talking about, I put one up earlier today on the battle between Tennessee now and Oklahoma for him. And like I said, got dual residency here, both of my teams that I actually rooted for. Tennessee is my SEC team. For those that do not know, Oklahoma's always been my main Big 12 team, my main team and my Big 12 team, but Tennessee was the team that I chose as a child outside of family. And watching him play, like you said, he's a nightmare for matchups because he can go 3 technique or he can go on the edge or he can step back to linebacker and then just rush. Like he's big and he's fast. Like I think that's the thing that shocked me the most. Like even watching Dominic McKinley's film, Dominic McKinley 40 time is a 4.75. Could you imagine that much size, 290 running at you at 4.75? PJ's brother, I can't pronounce his name, but he ran his 40 time at edge at 280, got drafted into the NFL. I think the Colts picked him up. He ran like a 4.44, 4.45.
Out of Northwestern,
Yes, out of Northwestern. Guys, could you imagine 280, 290 pounds running you down at 4.4 speed? Like, that's terrifying, period. That's a massive bear chasing you. And you're not going to outrun a bear. If you've ever heard anybody tell you, depending on the bear, you either play dead, you fight it, or you die. Because you're not going to win in a race.
You square up.
You square up. Just come on, man. Let's go. Let's go. And that's what you're seeing with some of these big linemen. And Nwaneri is that type of dude. Like, he's big and he's fast. Like I'm watching him chase dudes down. Like you could probably throw him in at tight end and he'll outrun a lot of your
He's freaky.
secondary players. He's very
He's
freaky.
freaky.
And his visit in Tennessee went well so far, and it looks like it is really going to be a dogfight between Tennessee and Oklahoma because twofold. Chendavius Bradley is from the Kansas City area, and he was his host this past weekend, which was genius on Tennessee because now it's an opportunity to try to talk him into like, hey, I'm from that same area. You should come here too, and this is how I adapted. And then, of course, having him come to Oklahoma, you got Caden Green as well as PJ. From the KC area that's doing the exact same thing. Plus, his head coach is an Oklahoma alum. So you've got a lot of connections between both. And then, of course, Josh Heupel being, former Oklahoma quarterback, played with Williams, head coach at Oklahoma. So you've got so many ties and so much to argue, bro. It's going to be a tough, and it's going to come down to the wire for this one. I don't think anybody else is going to be able to make a dent into this race. I really think it's probably 60-40 Oklahoma right now to Tennessee, but I think that margin is very thin.
Just to play devil's advocate here, just for conversation's sake, where do you think Georgia fits into all of this? He came off that Georgia visit. Early reports were that he really enjoyed his time there, but that was before the Oklahoma visit. Mm-hmm. Really loved his Oklahoma visit, and by all reports, he's very much enjoyed his Tennessee visit. I mean, guys, look, if we're really diving into this, all three places, you hear the common theme. You're going to enjoy your recruiting visit. You go anywhere. How do you view Georgia here?
I don't know if Georgia really has a big play in this situation, even though Georgia has a great track record of developing defensive linemen. I think the bigger thing for that one will probably be the travel, like the distance from home. That's probably the big question. I say maybe does Georgia play Missouri this year? That's going to be the question of, is they're going to come closer to home? I look at that when I look at some of the recruits and where they decide to go also is where's that proximity to home? Like talked about like Nebraska, one of their biggest issues for them in recruiting was they went to the Big Ten and lost an entire Texas pipeline because they never go down there. Like there's no reason to go to Texas because they ain't in your conference unless you set all of your non-conference game against Texas teams. What sense does it make? And that means that you need to travel to all of them. That way these kids' families can easily get to at least 1 or 2 games. They can bring more family than they would normally instead of just, the immediates that would fly around the country with you. That's the question I ask when it comes to like going to like a Georgia. Nwaneri seems like a very family guy, and based upon the reports, if he's big on family, traveling that far is a lot tougher. Oklahoma's a 5-hour drive.
Yeah,
that's nothing.
True.
I've made that trek numerous times. My son has soccer tournaments up there. I go to KC every year. I'm in KC for at least soccer. And so that's kind of, and then from there, it's the development. And OU's Bates has put some guys in the pros. So has BV. So you've got a lot when it comes to that. And Travis, I could totally see you winning. I got to help the Bear in that fight. I totally see that with you.
So you're saying I should provide the Bear with the Bear mace?
Yes. Because if he's going against Travis, yes.
No, but this is the misconception. We've all been fooled. It's not mace meant to defend against bears. It's mace meant to be sold to bears to defend against people.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like Travis.
Yeah, you see Travis walk in there, man. I'm terrified already.
That's where the Bears need their mace. That's why it's bear mace.
That's true. That is very true. Touche.
We've been fooled.
We've been fooled. I've been bamboozled, hoodwinked, led astray, run amok.
Big bear mace propaganda has fooled us all into putting our money in and shooting the Bears with their own mace. I mean, can you imagine the disrespect? It's like someone coming into your house, filling up a water gun with your water, and then spraying you in the eyes with it. That's just wrong. That's just wrong.
It's just foul, Jody. That's foul.
Help the Bear. Oh, God.
Oh, that's so good.
You hit the nail on the answer. That comment. Seeing us. I might have missed something, Shadow. If you, I might have missed what you're referring to. Someone said something. Cole says Texas at Bama predictions this year. We're going to get into that a little bit later, Cole, because I could go on for about 30 minutes this evening, but I will give you a very shortened version of this. And then Lori, we're going to get to your comment. I've meant to hit yours, and I've seen it several times, and I apologize for that. But my kind of opinion on this is I'm very glad that Texas is playing in Tuscaloosa this year, right? Last year, Alabama got to play in Austin. And I think if you're looking at how you would rather break this game down, if you are Nick Saban in Alabama, you'd much rather bring Bryce Young and Will Anderson into a hostile Austin environment than have Texas come with their guys to Tuscaloosa. And then you're looking at, you don't really know who the quarterback is going to be. Chat didn't pass the vibe check. So, they did not. So you don't really know who your quarterback's going to be. I like a lot of the things on Alabama's defense. I think there's a possibility Alabama's defense is really going to impress a lot of people. I think that Tommy Rees coming in actually could provide some stability for Alabama's offense, because the more I've been doing film watches on Alabama's offense, one of the biggest problems we saw from that Bama offense was the relationship between quarterback and wide receiver. And before anybody thinks I'm saying that was a Bryce Young issue, that was a this or this wide receiver, that's not my contention at all. My point here is that last year, Bill O'Brien had Alabama wide receivers running a variation of option routes. What I mean when I say that is imagining you're on a go route, but that corner, he's playing over top coverage. He's completely showing to you, you're not going to beat me deep. I'm going to bail. Yep. I'll give up underneath, but you are not going over top. In that circumstance, the Bama wide receiver is supposed to hot route and then run a comeback depending on where they're out. The X wide receivers had their own route modifications. The Y wide receiver had their own route modification. Z had their own route modification, so on and so forth. So it created a situation where, prime example, Cole, if you go back and watch the Kansas State bowl game, and Coach Smook and I were talking about this on the Bama Standard live Tuesday evenings, would love to see you over there. We were talking about how one of the biggest issues, especially in that Kansas State game, was you would see Bryce Young throw the ball to Jermaine Burton, but they were just not on the same page through the initial parts of that game. They were just off. Well, it's because neither of them were technically, well, I guess one of them was technically wrong, but at the same time, neither of them were technically wrong. Jermaine Burton had played at one side of the wide receiver rotation, and then he got moved to the different side, and so his hot routes shifted. So he was basically running a route and shifting in after reading the defensive coverage into, okay, well, this is supposed to be a comeback. And Bryce is throwing it as if it's like a slant, because, oh no, it's a comeback if you're X, but you're Z now. Now it's not a comeback if the DB does this. That took me multiple minutes to explain. It was probably really clunky. It was probably not great. But now I want you to imagine you're in the fire of a football game and you have to figure all this out. Guys, Bryce Young was a godsend for Alabama. I don't think people realize what it is he processed on a down to down. It was incredible.
That's quarterback play nowadays in general. And that's why there's very few that are able to even get themselves drafted. That's why you see maybe 6 quarterbacks drafted through the entire NFL draft that you can even remember year after year out of the hundreds of quarterbacks that are available, because that specific piece there, processing all that information so quickly is hard. And that's why there's limit. That's why the top 1% makes it to the NFL. Let's put it that way. And so you can't expect every player on your roster to have the capabilities to break down a defense immediately on the spot and be able to adjust their routes while also knowing what their counterpart's going to do. That's where it gets tough. Those wide receivers got a lot of process too, and it's hard to do it on the fly for a lot of them. So that's where your quarterback can be able to try to, orchestrate things, but you still got to be able to read the defense and understand where it's going to be at. And so those ratios, those NFL concepts are a lot easier when you see the similar teams over and over and over again, not when it's changing up constantly and you only get 4 years to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know, SEC, we don't know if Buckner is going to be the quarterback. I would actually wager he's the least likely, but that's neither here nor there. That's some different thoughts I have. But I do think Reese can simplify the offense and make it a bit more friendly. Whereas last year it was so reliant on Bryce. It was so reliant on the processing power of Bryce, and now it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a little bit different. So this is going to be something we have to watch. I don't think Texas is going to let them target Quinn. I don't think that it was anything malicious last year. That's football, man. It's incredibly unfortunate, but I don't think anybody's out here to hurt anybody. A lot of these guys, they know each other. They want each other all to succeed. But
they've gone to camps together. They know they may end up on the same team in the NFL potentially.
Yeah,
all that jazz.
Quinn, don't get me wrong, man. Quinn, I'm very excited to see what he does. But Cole, this has all the makings of a phenomenal game. Has all the makings of a phenomenal game. I don't know who the quarterback is going to be. Shadow, great point. Both UT and Bama expect big things from their offensive lines this year. Yeah, no doubt. Very interested in Wolford's evolution of the offensive line. I don't have to speak too much on what Kyle Flood has done there. The results speak for themselves within 3 years. Unbelievable. And Kim says it was just unfortunate, Kim. It was just super, super unfortunate. Oh, gotcha. That's my mistake working. That's my mistake. That's absolutely on me. Yeah, no. And that offensive line working. They're going to be super cognizant. That's why we go 11 personnel without the usual bunch formations. Well, I think you guys will actually mix in some stuff like some stack formations, because that gave Alabama a lot of trouble this past year. But Alabama also did not adjust at all last year. We can look at the Tennessee game with Jalen Hyatt, where they just did not adjust until it was too late. I would say they waited a while to adjust in the Texas game, but the reason why I'm not going to give you that as a legitimate argument here, Pooh, because that's not a good faith argument. Quinn Ewers got hurt in that game. So while I can sit here and say, yes, Alabama did switch up how they were guarding Xavier Worthy when Worthy was killing them, I don't know if it would have been effective because Quinn was on fire and they had a quarterback change. So I can't in good faith be like, the lack of adjustments in that game, but I can certainly point to Tennessee where that defense just did not adjust.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interesting stuff. Now, last thing I wanted to end on tonight. KP, if you're still in here, I hope you are. We get to talk about your Trojans, teams to watch in recruiting. Now, Jay,
real quick though, before you dive into their tie, James Nesta, one of the players we were talking about that was at ChampUBBQ weekend, will commit tomorrow at 7 p.m.
Tomorrow
Eastern
at 7
time.
p.m.
Yep. So I know that you were, concerned about being in the streets. So
Lori, actually, thank you so much, Jay. Lori asked, who commits first? Watch tomorrow, 7 p.m. I don't know that he's going to OU, but that's he's coming off of ChampUBBQ, enjoying his time. James Nesta. We also saw a linebacker that OU is after tweet out that he no longer plans to go take that visit to Oklahoma. So that would indicate that maybe a spot is filled. Once again, reading the tea leaves here. Watch tomorrow, 7 p.m. James Nesta. Great tidbit, James. Or Jay, thank you so much. JB says Bama run game versus Texas D-line and Texas O-line versus Bama Pack will be interesting. That will be a phenomenal matchup, JB. No other way around it. But as we wind down tonight, teams to watch in recruiting. Look, I don't think there's any way around this. USC is doing some interesting things right now. And the reason why I give you USC, Jay, is because of the change that's on the horizon, right? And it's not simply USC. I think we could talk about Oklahoma. We could talk about Texas. We could talk about USC because they're all teams, UCLA, that will have a massive change on the horizon, right? But I talk about USC because they have an interesting little breakdown of their class right now. And we were talking about this before we got on, where, let me get this right here. Got to scroll to it. Here we go. If we look at their 11 prospects in their class as it currently sits, they have 2 top 300 prospects that are tight ends. I love the guy they just got. Really big fan of him. 5 guys on the defensive side of the ball, including 2 top 100 defensive backs. They have 2 offensive linemen. They have a wide receiver and an athlete. They sit just outside that top 10 classes per the 24/7 Sports Composite at 12. Pooh says, I don't believe in the USC defense. And Pooh, that's a big reason why, for me, they're a team to watch. We have questions. We have questions about USC's defense. And as a theme of my content, we look for answers to questions. Now, I think the move to the Big Ten will provide even more questions. The last time Alex Grinch was the defensive coordinator in the Big Ten, it did not go well. That Ohio State year, where Ohio State had a top 15 defense the year before, dropped to like 58th in the nation under Alex Grinch, and then went to a top 10 defense in college football the year after he left. But they are recruiting to need, right? Like I got to be honest, the two top prospects at tight end, love both of those additions. Great additions right there. The 5 guys on the defensive side of the ball, I love that. I think Lincoln's best move so far has been retaining Dante Williams when he got to USC, personally.
Yeah.
He is the reason they got a 5-star quarterback last year in Damani Jackson, because Bama wanted him and wanted him bad. Bad. And let me tell you all this, full court press was sent. And you genuinely, right? You think Dante Williams, because he's the reason. I promise you that. But then he gets the Dakota Fields and then Marcellus Williams, 2 interesting defensive backs. So USC is at an interesting crossroads right now. And I talked about this here recently. This is the last year with Caleb Williams. They have another 5-star quarterback who's fantastic.
Yeah, Malachi's really good.
He's great. Caleb is special. You know what I mean? It's just like when we talk about great example, replacing Bama's quarterback or Texas replacing their running back. I like Ty Simpson. He was a former 5-star. Jalen Milrose, a great dude, all the athletic ability you could want. You're replacing Bryce Young. Dude won a Heisman. That's not easy. Texas, you have a 5-star running back. I love Jonathan Brooks. Blue is a guy that gets forgot about, and he's unbelievable. Savion Red put the nation on display. You lost a Heisman caliber player, in my opinion, in Bijan. I think Bijan's a Heisman caliber player. He's the type of player that if he wins a Heisman trophy, Jay, do you bat an eyelash?
No.
Maybe because it's a running back and it's been such a quarterback heavy award.
It's been so long since we've seen that. So yeah.
But that would be the only reason. It would not be because of ability, but because of the perception of the award. So when we look at USC, they have a move to the Big Ten on the horizon. Caleb Williams won't be there anymore. This is a big year, which is exactly why, guys, we got to talk a lot about USC recruiting this year. We got to have a lot of conversations because they're doing things well right now. They're doing things exactly how you'd want them to be done. Just outside the top 10 in the middle of June, great place to be. There's a lot of questions to answer. A lot of questions. What are your thoughts on this?
No, yeah, they're sitting in a good spot for themselves right now. And you pointed out nicely that, there's been a big emphasis on the defensive side. And, we joke about, Lincoln Riley and his regime and what they did here at Oklahoma. And a lot of those, really besides Alex Grinch, there's a few coaches that aren't there. Like Thibodeau's not there no more. You got Calvin Thibodeau, who's down at SMU. You got Jamar Cain over at LSU. So a lot of the coaches that were recruiting in that particular subset of players that we struggled at aren't really on his staff anymore. And so now he's retooling and trying to figure it out. But I think the one thing that he has recognized, even though it is a little bit late to the party, in my opinion, especially leaving Oklahoma, is got to get some big defensive linemen, and you got to keep them big. Can't shave them down. Can't run too much speed. You got to have some run stuffers for the fourth quarter. Like, you can run speed D and do all of that stuff in the first couple of quarters, maybe throughout the third. But once you get mid-third quarter on, you got to have run stuffers and people that's going to just stop movement. And that was always the Achilles heel of Oklahoma, was that they'd come out guns a-blazing in the first half. Kind of like we talk about Sark and the way he does things. He comes out, great opening act, script is fantastic in the beginning, but the ending of the story or the TV series is like, what the heck happened? That's what you've seen with the Sooners when under the Riley regime, is it got to that third quarter and then they just started falling apart, and then exhaustion started to kick in, it looked like, or just looked like you were going, one team did a lot of Pilates and the other one was actually doing weight training. And similar to when Baylor played Gonzaga in the college basketball national championship game, you could tell the difference in the physicality on the field. that's what you start to see down the line. And so I'm thinking that this staff is recognizing we've got to do this, especially if you plan on going to the Big Ten and surviving. The Big Ten is all about the front. Those trenches, they've got the big dudes. That's what they're built on. Ohio State and Michigan, even Michigan State, as much as I'm just like, meh on them, Penn State, Wisconsin now with Luke Fickell, he's going to bring back the old school Wisconsin
Maryland
setup.
even.
Yeah. You know, you say
Maryland's not going to run it on you, but you got to watch out for them.
Right. But Penn State now, and I mean, KPS understood that as long as you got California quarterbacks, you'll be fine. I mean, their quarterback right now is not from California. So, you're going to bring in Malachi, but I mean, Caleb's from the East Coast. My point is that those quarterbacks doing heroic stuff ain't going to last long when you're playing against the Big Ten. At a certain point, you're going to hit a wall. Believe us, we synced it. SEC shows you that every year. At a certain point, you're going to hit a wall by having one dude try to save the day. Your defense still has to show up late third quarter and fourth quarter, because if your quarterback is scrambling around just like Caleb was against Utah and Tulane, that's when things start to fall apart long term. You're not going to win. You're going to lose those games. That's why those 3 losses showed up for USC, is because at a certain point, Utah just started just punching you in the mouth. And you want to be the ones throwing the punches. You don't want to be the ones receiving it.
Yeah, you always want to be. It's interesting. I talk about this all the time, and it's much easier, especially the example I'm about to give, Jay. It's probably not the greatest example, but I think it will land all the same. It's always interesting when we're watching UFC fights, and you'll have one guy just getting mollywopped, right? And he's covering up. He's just trying to survive. And it's an interesting paradox, because the more you cover up, the more you shell up and try and survive, the more you're admitting to your opponent, okay, you can keep teeing off. The more you're going to get hit. Whereas if you open up and you start swinging back, you might get knocked out.
Yep.
But that's the only way you're going to go out of that ring winning. You either go out on your shield, or you just have the guy beat you like a drum. And not the greatest example, but I think you can understand the connection I'm making there, right? Where you got to go out swinging. Even when it seems bad, you got to go out swinging.
Agreed.
KP says, as long as you have California quarterbacks, USC will be fine. Look, I'm not going to argue about the California quarterbacks thing. The California quarterbacks have been killing it in college football right now. A few years ago, I think it was before last season, there was like 5 or 6 quarterbacks that all hailed from the state of California, all of which were being talked about as NFL prospects. That is a great point. What I would push back is that we've seen Lincoln Riley have unbelievable quarterback play. I mean, transcendent quarterback play before.
And it
hasn't gotten it done. So I agree with you. If you can keep the California quarterback, I'm certain. Hey, and Julian saying at the Elite 11, the California quarterbacks are nice. Point well received. But I think history has proved to us you can't be one-sided in college football and win a national championship. You can have Kyler Murray, who's a legitimate cheat code. You can have Caleb Williams, who's a legitimate cheat code. And if you're not a balanced team, you're almost limited in what you can do. Thoughts on that, Jay?
No, you're right. And it's funny when you look at the quarterbacks Caleb and Malachi are probably the 2 first Spencer Rattler as well. Your 3 quarterbacks that Riley has brought in as recruits that weren't really transfers, that he just kind of just groomed and made into just greatness because they had all the tools needed. But developing from the bottom up, Caleb and Spencer Rattler probably are your best options, and we'll see what Malachi looks like next year. But no, I agree with you, KP, on that. I said the same thing. As long as you have your having California quarterbacks or just a good quarterback in general, Lincoln Riley's offense is going to run, but that's not going to win you enough. We watched it here at Oklahoma. That was the biggest gripe. Hell, you had Heisman Trophy winner Baker Mayfield out there cooking. He's considered one of the greatest, or if not the greatest, college football player to play statistically with all of the accolades and numbers and stuff that he was putting up. The problem he ran into was
he was the number 1 quarterback on the ESPN list since 2000.
Exactly. And the team ran out of gas. The defense ran out of gas, and Georgia just ran down a throat at the end of the game. You see that often with Riley's setup. We saw that when they went up against Alabama. Actually, that Alabama playoff game was more on the offense than it was the defense, because the offense was just not even competing in that game, unfortunately. But LSU is generational. And so, anyway,
Well,
what
if I
they,
may, if we
yeah,
look at that Alabama game, I think this is a moment I've always pointed to in that Alabama game because we've joked with each other and people say, oh, if there was 15 minutes more, we'd have gotten you, Ty. And I was like, look, your offense was starting to cook. Nothing taken away there. You had Kyler, you had unbelievable players on that offense. I grant you that. The reason why I don't think it would have mattered if you had 15 minutes or 30 minutes more is the one moment I've always pointed you to. Whenever Oklahoma went on a scoring run, Nick Saban started screaming, turned around, looked at Tua, did this. Tua jumped up, started smiling, put his helmet on, and within 3 plays, they went 90 yards or something
for
and
a
scored a
touchdown.
touchdown because they stopped throwing the ball. And Nick Saban
Yep.
told Tua and them, okay, foot back on the gas, let's go. They hit Devontae Smith with a slant route, and he took it like 50 yards.
That was, and exactly what it was, is that Bama took their foot off the gas. That score is very deceptive on what it actually was. If Oklahoma had come out swinging in the beginning, it would have been a boat race. It would have been a dogfight, more of a dogfight than it was.
Yes.
But the problem was Oklahoma just let them go up 28-0 and it just ended it. And like, yeah, sure, they came back later, but like we said, it was because Saban took his foot off the gas. He knew who he was playing next. That was the point. We got a big game coming up after this one, and it's going to be a very good team with a really
Tua's
good
coming off
defense.
of surgery, so we
Tua's
don't want
coming
to
off.
do too much.
Exactly. We gotta pace ourselves. And that's kind of what it felt like Oklahoma did against Georgia in 17 in the Rose Bowl. After going up 31-17 at the half, they're like, all right, let's coast our way and prepare ourselves for Bama because we got to play against Jalen Hurts and Alabama in the national championship. And Georgia was like, no, we're going to keep fighting. And that's where your issue came in. It's like, no, you've got to put your foot on their throat and you've got to hold it if you want to be successful going up against SEC teams, especially nowadays with everyone having more of a free-flowing offense and it's a lot more points being put on the board. You've got to keep going, especially if your defense isn't prepared to handle everything that's going down. Heck, defense got a defensive touchdown, and we still were slowly letting the quarterback play go. So anyway, not to go too far off on a tangent, my point is I'm not disagreeing that quarterback play is going to be great for USC. It's going to be every year because Lincoln Riley is fantastic at it. Just like Clemson's going to have really good quarterback play with Garrett Riley as their OC. You got to get the defense. And it looks like they're recognizing that going into the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Let's look at what Michigan has. What, 4 offensive linemen already committed?
My God.
I mean, go look at Michigan's class. They're building up the trenches. And I realized that Sharon Moore, former OU alum,
former OU guy, yeah.
That's the focus there. They're just like, no. We gonna have these trenches locked up. We get these trenches locked up. We could just pound the ball nonstop and we could run this clock down. And then, when we need JJ to throw the ball, we'll let JJ throw the ball. Even though JJ's a 5-star quarterback that can throw the ball, they want to beat you up on the line. And if you can do that, that's where success can come in.
Yeah.
Period.
So you don't think if Grinch was trash, we would get a new defensive coordinator? You don't think Riley would? No, I certainly do, KP. I certainly do. But the question is like, when and what defensive coordinator it would be. I don't disagree with you. And that's why I think whenever we talk about this, we take a very specific approach and we talk about the limitations that we have seen, because in fairness, you're right. It could change, but that's why I thought one of the more interesting moves is the theme was already laid out before the move from OU to USC had happened. And he took the same defensive coordinator with him. Now, there's that famous quote about, if you do something the same way over and over again, that's the true definition of insanity without changing anything. We're going into year 4 with a speed defense, and KP, like I understand this. I wasn't an Oklahoma Sooner fan. I'm kind of the third party in this. But just looking at it, my biggest concern for USC is the type of defenses and the type of offenses they run in the Big Ten, because I can directly look at the last time Alex Grinch was there when he inherited a top 15 defense in the Big Ten, and it dropped outside the top 50. And then you ask, well, what changed the next year? He wasn't there, and they went right back to top 10. That's notable. That's not one thing changed.
I'll say this, KP, on top of what Ty is saying. Grinch is Riley's boy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to fire your friends. It's kind of like Bob Stoops firing his brother.
I want Grinch to get it right. Don't get me wrong, because I think there are aspects to what he does that if you modify, you can take aspects of it. But I think that we've seen that approach, that speed D approach, is much more attuned to stopping pass than it is a run heavy power team, which is why I specifically talk about the transition to the Big Ten worries me.
Yes, because that's what they do.
Yes, that's what they do.
What Wisconsin is infamous for it. So is Michigan. Ohio State has their moments. They've been really big in the wide receiver space lately, but they still get really good running backs. Penn State's like that. I mean, when Nebraska's actually doing some stuff right, they had was that Grant that they had last year at running back? He was one of the nation's tops. He was really good. That is what they do. At the Iowa can't score touchdowns, but they're running down your throat nonstop. Just remember that. You may see an Iowa touchdown out of them, which is 2 safeties and a field goal, but Iowa will figure out a way to beat you up. That's what they do. Keep your minds, all of that. So yeah, just FYI, KP. That's just what we're seeing. We're just going off what we've seen. And so for Grinch, he probably would be better if he just did secondary, as somebody mentioned in the comments.
No, I think that's 100% true. And KP, thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for contributing. Because look, you're right. The California quarterbacks, they've been unbelievable. And I do agree with you. I think if this year doesn't go right, they will move on. They will get a different defensive coordinator. So you're right in terms of like problems. I think it is a much better situation to be sitting here saying, okay, so we can get a new defensive coordinator. That seems like a fairly linear problem to fix. I grant you that. If it hadn't been a problem we'd seen multiple times, which is where I do think the conversation is necessary, but I also do think it's completely fair to meet you halfway in this, because you're right. Like there's a lot of what you said that is right. It's just, it's a conversation we have to have. Right. Especially with the move on the horizon. But that being said, KP, there is a reason why I wanted to talk about USC, because they are doing good work with that move on the horizon. They know it's coming. They know what they have to do. They've been doing good work. Wanted to talk about it. A lot of work more to do, but hey, recognize what's being done. And I'm excited. I'm excited for a lot of college football right now.
Agree. So I saw that the question popped up from Alan Barrier, the $5 contribution.
Yes, I need to get back to that.
Around the Table Sports. Thank you so much. I think we should jump right into it right now. Can Bama have the best defense in the conference and can still fix the penalty problem? So me and Ty talk about this a lot, and I kind of want to take this one from him a little bit because Ty's not the biggest Steel fan. He thinks he's capable of doing some things, but he's not the biggest guy on him. But I see a shadow DC truly helping run things in the background that will potentially take over the role. He is a former DC you had twice. This will be his third stint. This will be his third stint at Alabama. And I know him very well because he was head coach of my former team, of one of my teams, which is Jeremy Pruitt. Now, you know, Pruitt is still going through all the stuff with the NCAA. We don't know what he's going to get, if he's going to get a penalty thing or show calls or whatnot. Most likely he will be cleared soon enough. But I think that Kevin Steele lasts this season just to run it as a shadow DC. I think it goes back to Pruitt, and I think the defense goes back to what it looked like back in the 16-17 era for you all.
Yeah, hopping on this, Alan, I apologize. We got deep in that tangent, and I was in my own little world. Thank you so much for the $5. Once again, I really apologize. I had this comment up here meaning to hit it, and then just kind of got deep in that explanation. But kind of piggybacking off of what Jay says, my issue with Kevin Steele is not that I think he's a bad defensive coordinator. He's very seasoned. He's very experienced. It's just that there was an option out there that I think a lot of people really wanted. Now, that just so happens to be the option Jay's talking about. And I think it is going to happen. By everything I've heard, by everything I talked to, there is a confidence that Jeremy Pruitt will eventually be on this staff. Now, to answer your question specifically, first question is, can Alabama have the best defense in the conference? Second question, can Steele fix the penalties? I'm going to address the second one first, because if there's one thing I am very excited that Kevin Steele will do, I think because he's so experienced, he is a steadying force that Alabama actually needs right now on that defensive side. That defense last year, no shortage of talent. It was all over the place in terms of penalties, and it was unbelievably frustrating to watch. 17 penalties in multiple games.
Yeesh.
Of JRP, shout out. Yeah, true, James. 17 penalties in one game. And I think that happened in multiple. I know they had multiple games over 10 penalties, multiple games over 15 penalties. I think Kevin Steele does a lot to help fix that. I think he brings in a steadiness that Alabama fans are going to really love on that defense, right? Now, whenever we talk about can Alabama have the best defense in the conference, they lost some key pieces. They lost both safeties. They lost Will Anderson. They lost both middle linebackers. I think we also need to give credit where it's due to what the Georgia Bulldogs have been able to accomplish. I think we'd be remiss, right? As much as I'm an Alabama fan, we'd be remiss. We wouldn't be doing our due diligence in having a well-positioned conversation about college football if we disregarded what Georgia has done. They're going to be in the conversation for the best defense in the SEC. We also need to acknowledge what LSU has done. Harold Perkins comes back, a player who going into last season, I actually thought would be the best player on LSU's defense. And this is before Harold Perkins took college football by storm, was Mason Smith, the former 5-star defensive lineman who actually didn't get to play last year because of an injury. They have Wingo out the transfer portal from Missouri. He boomed, but now you pair him with a Mason Smith. That LSU defense is going to be fun now. That's going to be a really fun defense to watch. But this Alabama defense is going to be, and I feel very strongly in this. I might have to eat crow on this. But if I do, I do. It is what it is.
It is what it is, right?
We give so many takes on stuff, you're bound to be wrong a lot, right? It is what it is. I think Alabama's defense could be better this year because of the lack of penalties, because of the increased discipline. And I think they're getting back to some fundamentals in terms of blitz packages. I think they're getting back to some fundamentals in terms of adjustments. We're not going to completely disregard adjustments. I think one of the other things we also are not going to do is play LSU with no quarterback spy and then be shocked when Jaden Daniels scrambles on a third down to get the first down and everybody's looking around with a surprised Pikachu face. And I'm just like, yeah, that's probably what happens when and wouldn't you know it, when they started spying him, that got cut out real quick. I think that the seasoned nature of Kevin Steele is such a welcome addition to the staff right now. I think Alabama will absolutely be in the conversation for having the best defense in the conference, because I think when we look at some of the areas they retool, questions at linebacker, and I think when I say questions, understand it's not from a talent perspective, it's from a lack of experience perspective.
Right.
Love the guys they have there. Justin Jefferson turned heads during that spring game. Tresman Marshall looked real good coming from Georgia. Analogous defensive systems, so he's going to be able to pick up the lingo real quick. Then you have Jahad Campbell, you have Deontay Lawson, you have Kendrick Blackshire. I mean, you have got a wave of dudes outside of that. And then at the safety position, Allen, I cannot contain my excitement for Caleb Downs. I think he is going to be monstrous year one for Alabama. The question is who do they put beside him? Remember the work they did in the transfer portal now. They got Trey Amos, and then they got the safety. They got two real big pickups out the transfer portal to help that secondary. This Alabama defense will be in the conversation for the best defense in the SEC, but we also have to give credit where it's due. LSU is going to have a fun defense. Georgia, I just don't think we'd be doing our jobs if we just wrote off Georgia. People wrote off Georgia last year, saying they wouldn't be able to repeat. And I don't know, have y'all peeped Georgia's schedule? You'll get diabetes on that schedule.
Oh, God.
Cupcake. And that's not on Georgia. That's not a shot at. They have no control over that. That's the way the cookie crumbled whenever the move happened. It is what it is.
I mean,
they kind of have control over it, but you get my point, right? We're like, no. I knew exactly when you did that. I was like, he has me. He has me dead. They do have control over it, but at least they were supposed to have OU this year.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this year, and then but the problem is the return game was not until like 2026 or something like that.
Yeah, the SEC stopped that. That wasn't Georgia.
They stopped it.
Oklahoma.
They stopped it because they didn't want it. They didn't want the They couldn't guarantee the return game was going to be set up properly due to that. And since they were coming to the conference, there was no reason to, keep that going. So
Little
hurts my
tidbit
heart.
right here before we get out of here. Running back Dylan Lee commits to Iowa State.
Yep.
Robinson looking good for OU. Good point. Good point. And Jay, I gave a long spiel. I wanted to hear your take on a team that you think we need to watch in terms of recruiting. We talked a lot about USC. Is there another team that you would be on the lookout for, just to kind of tell people like, hey, circle it?
Particular conference or just overall?
Overall, before you go, SEC, the only reason they scrapped it is because the Bama Texas one was in back-to-back years. And so it worked really cleanly with the move to the SEC, where the Oklahoma one got a little bit mumble-jumbled with the move to the now, I don't get me wrong, I really wish they still had that game, but neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's more of a. I'll kind of jump into that one too. So SEC, like the thing is that Georgia didn't have anything available early, just like Oklahoma didn't, to be able to do it immediately. If it was back to back, I think they would have allowed it. But because it was like there was a gap between the Georgia game, the home and home setup, and so because the agreement was a home and home series, they were like, no, we're not going to do it that way, because what the expectation is for SEC scheduling moving forward is, after 24, there will be 3 teams that's a guarantee every year, and then every other team will be rotating. So you'll have rotations. Like it's like they're going to put 2 teams together and have them rotate. Every other year they'll face those particular teams. And so because of that, that's the reason why they couldn't keep it going, because the contract was a guarantee home and home for each. And they didn't want to make that one-sided, I guess you could say. But Georgia, but Bama and Texas is already hitting. They'll be finished their series right now. And so Georgia will be going to play against Clemson next year in Atlanta instead. And this year they picked up, I think, UAB instead, since they couldn't do the home and home setup. Because I think that other game was going to be, it's like 27 or 28. It was like far down the line. It was like, dang, that's like a distance out there. But
yeah, there was a lot of nuance to that. I'm sorry, I just wanted to hit that before you got deep in the weeds on your team. People need to watch.
Yeah, no. I think, looking at going into next year, I think one team to really pay attention to that could be honestly better than we're expecting, Notre Dame. I think they have their bounce back year. I think Marcus Freeman is capable, but he also has a very tough job. Like, it's hard recruiting at Notre Dame. It's hard with the way things are set up, but he's already got 2 top 100 players in the country and 4 top 200 players already consensus committed with his 19 commits that they have right now. Good God. How do you have 19 players committed?
Hey, Notre Dame does the same thing every year. They jump out real quick ahead of everybody. Last year, remember, they were the #1 recruiting class in the nation by a wide margin
for a
going
while.
Into June or July, I think it was. Yeah, they were. But they also had Keon Keeley in that class. They had a lot of guys that ended up elsewhere.
Yep. And so that they kind of do what like we talked about Florida does. They'll get a whole bunch of kids to commit and then let them go continue their visits. And then all of a sudden you see a whole bunch of flips. So you see the revolving door, which is what some schools are trying to avoid. It makes it harder for you to recruit. If it makes your job easier if you know how many players you've got coming in and you can focus on only the recruits you're going after. 100%. If you've got players constantly switching their mind, then it's like, I think Brent Venables said this best. If they're a diva during the recruiting process, they're going to be a diva afterwards. They're going to be a diva during the season too. And I think Saban takes that exact same approach too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the top coaches do. No doubt about it. I know another team we could easily throw out there is Colorado. And I mean, if we had more time, we'd dive into Colorado. But
yeah. And Brandon, you're right. Wisconsin is one that me and Ty is going to do a whole video episode of us talking about it. It's gonna come. It's gonna, you know what? It's gonna come. Me and Ty, as we've been getting together a lot more doing this, we're gonna talk a lot Wisconsin. I really want to. I'm actually gonna get with, I know the guy that does 24/7 up there, 24/7 Insider up there, Mike. I'm gonna hit him up. They definitely want to talk about what they're doing at Wisconsin, because I know it's gonna be special.
Technician, is that I thought Dylan Edwards decommitted, Keon Keeley decommitted, Peyton Bowen decommitted.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just those three, but I thought they had a bit of a wave, and I could be wrong. That could be a mistake, but I know Keon Keeley decommitted, no Peyton Bowen decommitted, and those were 2 5-stars. And I thought Dylan Edwards was committed to that Notre Dame class before he flipped, but maybe he was a Notre Dame lean, and that's what I'm thinking. You could be very right. I could be mixing that up. So very fair point right there. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end for this evening. We'll be going live again Friday evening, 5:00. Through the Haze will be coming to you Thursday, 11 o'clock in the morning, live for about an hour, hour and a half.
Keeping it at 11 o'clock, huh?
Keeping that 11 o'clock slot on Thursdays. I'm thinking Through the Haze will probably start coming Tuesday and Thursdays at 11 o'clock. But yeah.
I'm surprised you don't do a Wednesday morning, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I'd be streaming every day because I do the Bama Standard Tuesday evenings. I do this show Monday evenings, our other live show Friday evenings. I do the Through the Haze Thursday mornings. I do the SEC Connect Wednesday evenings.
Nights. Yeah.
Woo!
You're a working man.
Plus all my regular content. Those are just the live streams. Right. All the regular content. So yeah, it's you can catch me everywhere.
Hey, so technician, I went through 24/7 to go see how many decommits they had, and they had 3, 6, 8 decommits.
Wow. Which
in 2022 and
23. Once again, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at how they were recruiting, where they came out so quickly, it's wild that they I'm not surprised by those numbers. I don't think that there's anything negative because of the man.
23 signees. That's still pretty darn good. That's just not odd.
That's still a full class.
Yeah, it's full class. It's not like we're saying that they're getting their classes are completely depleted. It's more so that they're getting a lot of top players that end up going elsewhere.
And I think that's indicative of whenever we're in February or a March. We look and Notre Dame is just like super far ahead of everyone because they're usually in the ground floor. A lot of these guys. I got to give Freeman credit where he is I really like him. If you want to tell me a school that I want to do good, really want to be good next year, I want Notre Dame to be good. I really do. I really like Freeman.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy want. I want it to. I'm hardcore same because you can tell that they, like I said, they find a lot of guys on the ground floor, and that's huge.
Yes, it's just this perfect place to stop, Jay. We've came full circle. Oklahoma's visit policy. It's strange. It's not normal. But the flip side, a Notre Dame who also recruits very well, they recruit very quickly. It's just 2 different ways to get to the same place, the end class. So different things to think about for this evening. Glad y'all could join us through the Haze. Yeah. No, it's just a play on the last name, man. You know, you just got to have that play on the last name through the Haze. So it is what it is. Thank you so much, Lori. Jay, before we get out of here, and like I said, I'm sure everybody's familiar with your content. If y'all aren't, I need you to do me a favor. Go subscribe. He is just around the corner from 10,000. I think he has the same spread to 10,000. I mean, you covered that real quick, but get him to 10,000 subscribers. If y'all aren't subscribed, Jay, where can the people find you as you beat me to it?
You can find me here, Unfair Sports. Just search for me on YouTube. I'm there. We're dropping constant college football content, just like Ty does. You know, I'm expanding it. We're more OU centric, but I'm expanding into other schools just to continue to keep the content going because we hit a lot of dead times. And, you know, I like to make sure that there's stuff to talk about. And I like talking about sports and college football in general. So you'll see a lot more going down. I've started talking more Tennessee. I talk Colorado. I think I'm going to start talking more Wisconsin as well. I'm going to add them to the list. And eventually I'll pick an ACC team. But come pull up. We talk a lot, like I said, OU football. We do our thing. So, Ty, as usual, a blast.
Love it, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon. Pooh, why is Oklahoma selling tickets on YouTube ads? My brother in Christ, do they have another option? I mean...
Pooh, you want to fight, man. That's what you want, right? That's what you want.
They're down bad in Stillwater, Pooh. They're down bad, real bad. It is
starting battles. I love it. I love it. Please do more of that, my man.
We're getting out of here. Welcome to the spinning wheel of doom, and we are out.